Hello team, welcome to my session on CSSLP, and today we're going to discuss about how to prepare for CSSLP. The reason of making this video was, last year when I was preparing for this certification, there are a lot of resources out there for CISSP, CCSP, but I could not able to find a very good resource on CSSLP. So I thought with that state of mind, I made this video. I'm planning to make this video where I'm going to cover the exam parameters, exam status, strategies, important areas that you must consider when you're preparing for this certification. So CSSLP stands for Certified Secure Software Lifecycle Professional. It is a certification from ISC Square, primarily designed for the application security experts or the risk assessor who wish to drive their career path from a system security to the AppSec, or an auditor or consultant who basically handle all kind of an application security projects and everything. So I'm sure you will love this video because I really put my hard work on this video. It is a quite research of last 8-9 months which I did on this materials which I have consolidated, and I will assure you that this kind of a video you won't find on a YouTube with the preparation of CSSLP. My name is Prabh Nair, and for more information you can refer my LinkedIn profile. Thank you. Okay, so next part is called as a CSSLP approach, CSSLP aspect. Before going to discuss about in detail about CSSLP aspect and all that, let me explain you very high level overview of SDLC. See, whenever we talk about any application that we develop, okay, let me resize. Yeah. So when we develop any application, okay, there are so many functional parameters are involved by which we develop the application. But we also need to consider the security aspect in that application development. So we have a practitioner, okay, and we have a professional. Now, if you tell a practitioner, we need to conduct the DAST, Dynamic Application Security Testing, or SAST, you give him instruction, he will do that. But what is the role of a professional? Role of a professional is when to consider SAST and when to consider DAST. CSSLP talk about that only. In CSSLP, it basically provides the holistic approach which is required to secure the software development. In software development, we have a requirement phase. We have the first phase is basically we having a meeting where we're meeting with the customer. Then second phase is called as a requirement where we document the functional requirement. Here, functional requirement is from an application point of view. Like example, we need authentication control, we need authorization control. So we adding a security aspect into that. Then we have a design. Okay, during a design from a security point of view, threat modeling must be there. During a development, secure code standard must be there. During a release, signature verifications need to be there. So these inputs which I'm talking about, threat modeling in place, security functional requirement in place, during an initial meeting, what will be the security aspect need to be considered. These points are basically present by the risk professional. But problem is that risk professional cannot be, our security professional cannot be a master of everything. So then he basically attend the CSSLP program where he understand what will the security parameter we need from an application development point of view. So when I done with my CSLP, I was in I was in a position where I can able to present my facts and figure when I'm having a meeting with the stakeholders. Okay, in the first meeting, what security points I need to raise. During a functional requirement, when they document what is the security requirement need to be documented. What is RTM, request traceability matrix. We adding a security into that, then become STRM. So these aspects, the security aspect that we need in every phase, that I got to know in CSSLP, and that is what CSSLP talk about. Even I'm not going to breach NDA here, but when you drive the exam questions or when you practice the questions, that questions also test your thought process about the activities that we carry in the SDLC. Okay, no, you are a consultant and you have to drive, functional requirement. What is a mandatory document is required in the functional requirement? Definitely request traceability matrix or security request traceability matrix document is required because that captures the security requirement. So these inputs comes from the security professional and the one who basically attended the CSSLP program. That is why it says that, okay, CSSLP program is the talk about the holistic approach to secure the software development process. Okay, it is more about the security governance of an application or security governance that we need in the application development process. Okay, so CSSLP basically cover the process. Okay, it cover the various people, process and technology element. okay, which is basically involved in developing a software securely and how to make them work together, by which we can able to develop the application in a secure manner. CSSLP also talk about what is the ideas, what are the inputs are basically required, by which we can able to develop the application, release the application in a secure manner. The best thing about CSSLP is that it's a vendor neutral certification. CSSLP doesn't talk about how to secure C++, Java and all that. No, they talk about the best practice that required common in any coding parameters. Request traceability metrics, a mandatory parameters that is required in every phase, which is not a vendor centric. You're doing a Microsoft only, then we require this. No matter you adopt Microsoft, you adopt Java, you adopt any other programming language. Whatever the necessary parameters are required from the vendor neutral point of view, that is basically covered in the CSSLP. And the objective of this particular certification is to provide the a credential that talk about individual to contribute to the delivery of a secure software throughout the use of a best practices. As I said, tomorrow if I'm leading a team where the application security professionals or developers will take my inputs. We have a database, we have a SQL injections, so I'm in a position where I have to suggest where we need to protect this database and all that, why parameterized queries are important, why input validation is required, what is the ultimate goal of the application development, in which cases we can go for a test data, and if I'm going for a test data, how to sanitize the test data, what is the identical test environment. So these kind of inputs basically come from my side if I'm a CSSLP guy. So far what happened, I was doing a risk assessment for the infrastructure, I was doing a risk assessment for the processes, I was doing a risk assessment for the technologies, but now I'm doing a risk assessment of an applications. I'm working as a consultant where I'm giving them advices what need to be considered from the application development point of view in a secure manner. Because one thing you need to understand, ultimate goal of an application is to solve the business problems, and one of the business problem is to protect the application. So you are basically there to providing your security inputs. Try to understand that. What we learn in CISSP and CCSP about the 7 phases and 9 phases of SDLC and SLC, that 7 phases, that 9 phases is translated in a form of this domain. Every phase we have a respective domain in CSSLP. What are the major security contributions we are doing in every domain, that is covered in CSSLP. So CSSLP take the strategic long-term view to improve the overall state of software security within the organization by providing a tactical solution. CSSLP syllabus was revised last year in 2020, and they did pretty much good changes. So you can see the first domain we have called secure software concept. This domain is actually divided into 2-part team. One is called as a concept, and the second is called as a principles. You can call it as a security design principle. Whoever preparing for this exam, make sure you should have a good understanding, a solid understanding of the principles. Like example, we have a least privilege, separation duty, defense in depth, economy of mechanism, complete mediations, least common mechanism. So not only you need to understand the concept, but also need to understand how practically it works. See, one thing is that when we develop any application, once we receive a requirement from the customer, after understanding the requirement of a customer, it is my responsibility as a application security professional or CSSLP professional, which kind of a control we need. One example I can give you. Like one customer said that, Prabh, I want a website which is like a, just need to be logged in with his phone number. So it means they want a very simple website. Anyone can type his number, it receive a OTP, and by which he can able to log in into the portal. So I don't want to give any pain to my customer. So I understood this. I understood this requirement. So I place here is economy of mechanism, which is called keep it simple. So what is that? That is basically the example of a principle. Security design principle. Now one customer said, Prabh, I want to integrate the OAuth, I want to integrate the OpenID. With a single sign-on, he can able to access my resources. So I consider here what? I consider here is economy of mechanism. So after understanding a requirement of a customer, I'm going to organize my security design principle. That is why those who are preparing for this exam, you need to have a good understanding of this particular section. Okay, it's highly recommended to have a good understanding of the principle. Along with that, we also need to understand where we need a confidentiality, because in a concept area we're going to cover about confidentiality, integrity, availability, authorization, accountability, and non-repudiation. So those are some topics we cover in the concept. And as I already covered, the diversity of defense, component reuse, psychological acceptability, open design, complete mediation, which is a part of the second part of this particular domain 1. So highly recommend, do not skip that. Okay, there's one suggestion I would like to give. I'm going to discuss about the book that you have to refer. So I will tell you which book you have to refer for this particular concept, because they have explained pretty much in detail of that area. Then we have a domain 2, which is called as a secure software requirement, which is cover a 14% from the exam point of view. 14%. Team, this domain is a turning point for your preparation. Okay, if you're referring the CBK, which is a 2013 edition, this much is this section is basically very vast in that, but it is good if you can review from that. I'm going to share that book details in my description box, because there is no new book is out for the CSSLP in the market, apart from if you buy from a IC Square their official manual. So apart from that, there is no other author has released any new version of the book of the new syllabus. So in the secure software requirement, we're going to discuss about compliance requirement, data classification requirement. GDPR was a new section which is added here. Request traceability matrix or security requirement traceability matrix is a very important topic in this section. Make sure you should not skip that STRM, because this is where we capture the security requirement, and that particular document will follow entire in a development phases of a life cycle. So it will be follow entire the life cycle of an application, because based on the STRM we drive the security parameters. So you need to have a good understanding of the STRM. Along with that, you need to have a good understanding of use cases and misuse cases. Exam point is misuse case is something which came from a use case. Okay, use case is a positive testing and misuse case is a negative testing. And another important thing in the secure software requirement we have called a privacy requirement. So good understanding of a GDPR is required, because nowadays what happened, whatever the application you're developing, you need to consider privacy principle into that. So that is the good understanding. Then we have a cross-border data flow, user consent, data anonymization. These are basically part of the domain 2. One more important thing is that if you're planning to procure third party and sharing their security requirement, what kind of a security requirement need to be shared, that is also covered in the domain 2. Okay, so domain 2 is a very important domain for your exam preparation. Thank you. Now next is basically called as a secure software architecture and design. Okay, so this is one of the complicated domain we called. Okay, the most important topic in this domain is called as a threat modeling. Scenario analysis of a threat is called as a threat modeling. My suggestion is that even you have a good solid experience of the security or CSSP, make sure you should have a good understanding of a STRIDE. Spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, and denial of services. You need to have an elevation of privilege. So you need to have a good understanding of a STRIDE, especially spoofing, information disclosure, and denial of services. So threat modeling is something we perform in the design phase. One more important topic we have in this domain is called as the attack surface. Okay, we actually measure attack surface. Small advice from my side is our ultimate goal to place the security control to reduce the attack surface only. So we basically map this with the score that is called as a RASQ, relative attack surface quotients. So RASQ is a very important topic in domain 3. Objective of RASQ and usage of RASQ, objective of threat modeling, why we need to introduce threat modeling, all are basically important in the domain. So another important thing in the domain 3 which you need to consider most is called as a architecture, security architecture, in which we're talking about SOA, which is called service oriented architecture. IoT is very important. Make sure you should give proper attention to IoT and ICS. Small suggestion is that I made some video on CSSP Coffee Shot on ICS. Highly recommend to review those videos before going for the exam. Along with that, FGPA, which is a new topic in CSSLP, which is called as a Field Programmable Gate Array. That is also very important. And another important master stock in domain 3 is the cloud. Especially we're talking about the service model and deployment model. That is another important thing. Then we also going to cover in the domain 3 is called as a this one, which is called as a mobile architecture. Mobile architecture is also very important. Okay, along with that HSM, and the new topic is also there, which is called AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So these are some of the areas we have in the domain 3, which is called as a secure software architecture and design. There are other areas also there, which is in domain 3, which is very, very important, which is called as a upstream. Highly recommend to review the upstream and downstream. Okay, highly recommend to review the upstream and downstream dependency. Okay, how the application sending data or encrypted data and how the logical layer is going to process the data. So API integration of upstream to downstream and their advantage and disadvantage, and what is a negative impact on the functionality. So these are the important things you need to understand in the upstream and downstream dependencies. So when you review the course outline, you can see that section. 100% sure that okay, you should not skip this particular topic, upstream and downstream. Another important topic we have in this called as a architectural risk assessment. Okay, architecture risk assessment. You won't find this in your old syllabus or CSSLP. It is a part of the new syllabus, architecture risk assessment. And their different type of architecture risk assessment is also important in the exam, like pattern based, logical based and all that. So on the last slide, I have discuss about one resource that you can refer for this particular topic, because that is not there in the old version of CBK, which talk about the architecture risk assessment. Another important thing we have this called TCB, virtualization type, TCB operating system, CLR, JVM, credential management, X.509. These are the another important topics we have in the domain 3. Next is called as a secure software implementation. Secure software implementation is when we are in a stage of doing a coding. Okay, so in this section, we're going to discuss about cryptography is important, isolation, which is achieved by sandboxing, very important, type safety is important, input validations, good understanding of input validation, pros and cons of the input validation, concurrency, type safety. These are some of the topics we have in the domain 4. Along with that, there's a new topics are there, which is called as a OWASP, okay, SAS-IAST. Okay, and very, very important is code signing. Do not skip this topic in an implementation, code signing, because code signing offer authenticity and integrity. Code signing is very important. Okay, then another important topic is called as a SCA. SCA basically stand for software composition analysis. Okay, then we have a logical review of the code. That is another important topic, and how to apply security during a build process, like anti-tampering, compiler, compiler switches, compiler security. That is part of the domain 4. Do I need to know programming, Prabh? Do I need to have a programming knowledge for this certification? Definitely no. Okay, exam doesn't test you technically, that for sure. Okay, exam is test your concept, where what we need to place. Now I explain you about threat modeling, in which phase we perform a threat modeling, design phase. So you are a consultant and you're recommending them when to introduce a threat modeling. Okay, one of the favorite domain I love is secure software testing. Again, 14%. In this important area is called as a attack surface evaluation, ASV, attack surface evaluation or attack surface validation. Very, very important. Then fuzzing is there, type of fuzzing, which is called as a smart and mutation. That is another important topic we have. In cryptography validation, regression test. Regression test ultimate goal is to ensure the integrity of an application. So whenever any kind of changes we introduce in an application, make sure it should not compromise the integrity. So we rerun that particular test with the previous error and scope. So that is part of the regression test. And another important topic we have called a security testing strategy. We're going to discuss about functional testing, non-functional testing. Security is a non-functional requirement for your information. Okay, then test cases, test validations, test plan. Okay, all those things are basically part of the domain 5, which is called as a secure software testing, and usage of test data, when to sanitize, how to use test data. Okay, so those are things which is part of the domain 5. Then we have a domain 6. In domain 6, something you can see the sense of CISSP also. Okay, if you guys did CISSP, CISM, you will find the sense of that in a domain 6 and domain 7. From domain 6 onwards, your life will be very normal. Okay, the struggle you have seen in domain 1, so domain 2, 3 and 4. Okay, some part in 5, you won't see that struggle in domain 6. In domain 6, we're talking about the methodology by which we develop the applications. We have an adaptive, which is called agile. We have a predictive, which is a waterfall. When to use waterfall, when to use agile, what is Scrum. You need to have a high level understanding about that. Then we also talk about IRM, which is called as integrated risk management. If you proactively want to identify the risk and mitigate the risk or handle the risk in the entire SDLC process, best answer is integrate the risk management in the entire SDLC. And here the most important topic is basically called as a SAM. Very important for you to understand SAM. It is a part of the new syllabus we have. Then we have a BSIMM. Okay. So SAM is basically stand for Software Assurance Maturity Model. We adopt the strategy to develop the application in a secure manner. So SAM talk about what is the necessary parameters required to develop the application in a secure manner. And BSIM is basically all about deliverables. Before BSIM, we are using a CLASP. Okay, remember CLASP, CLASP. So what is CLASP? What is BSIMM? What is SAMM? These are basically part of the new version of CSSLP. So I doubt you will find this in your old version of CSSLP. Along with that, risk management, PCI DSS, legal regulatory requirement, intellectual property, especially the copyright and patent is also very important for the exam. Another important thing here, we have a champion. Please remember the champion. Champion is basically the guy who basically guides the people. Sorry. Security champion. Give me a second. Security champion. Security champion ultimate objective is to reduce the fear and promote independence, promote calm environment. Okay, like example, I am a CSSP. My passion is to teach information security. One day I join one organization where I work part-time as a security champion, where I'm doing a mentoring to my developers. I make them explain why we need to secure our application instead of creating a fears. So security champion is that guy. What is the important parameter need to consider for a security champion? That is part of the CSSLP. So that is the last part of the domain 6. Now application is developed and we are planning to deploy it. We need a secure environment in which we need to deploy that, and that is basically covered in the domain 7, secure software deployment and operation. In this, we're going to discuss about CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery, which is a part of the new version of syllabus. We also talk about the secrets codes that we manage for the applications and what is the important parameters required for the secure installation. Along with that, IACM, information security continuous monitoring, is very important. Patch management, change management, vulnerability management is very important. And web application firewall, ASLR, very, very important. So those are things is basically part of the domain 7. Finally, we have a domain 8. This is basically the condition where we need to procure the application from the vendor. You can say like that domain 1 to domain 7 is a sequence. Domain 8 is all about secure software supply chain. This is basically applicable in that situation when we're planning to procure the application from a vendor. What is required for that? So we have one concept called as a pedigree, PIDIGRE. PEDIGRE. Pedigree. And we also have a province. You need to have a good understanding of what is pedigree in province. It is all about the controls. Then we have a right to audit clause. What kind of a contract need to be drafted with the vendor from which you planning to procure the applications and all that. Okay, supply chain risk assessment, EULA agreement, common criteria, very important. Okay, protection profile of a common criteria, very important. Okay, you need to have a good understanding of that. Okay, then we have a TCSEC. Okay, that is also very important. So what are the parameters you're going to check in the product when you're planning to onboard them? What are the parameters you're going to check in the vendor before onboarding them? All those things is basically part of the domain 8. Make sure in the domain 8 there are some important documents we have, which I'm sharing in the last slide. You must refer that. Okay, so this is all from a high level domain coverage point of view. Now let's move to the next part. Okay, next part is called as a CSSLP examination. So the new version of CSSLP was revised to 3 hours. It was initially 4 hours, but now it is 3 hours, which is we have a 180 minutes, and in which you need to answer 125 questions. In 125, 25 are the research based questions. It means there is no marking for that. Can we able to identify in the real exam those 25 research based questions? Definitely no. For you, every question is a exam question, so it is difficult for you to identify which one is a research based and which one is basically the actual question. Exam has a multiple choice. Along with that, they also test you on drag and drops, sequence, identify hot boxes, and the passing grade is 700 out of 1000. Exam written in English, and it is delivered through a gold Pearson VUE testing centers. We have a Pearson VUE testing centers in all the major cities and all that, but this is happened in a very limited Pearson VUE centers, which is owned by Pearson VUE own. So that because of the exam credibility they want to maintain. That is, I really appreciate about IC Square. They are more concerned about the authenticity and the credibility over the money and monetary parts. So that is why this exam so far has not been driven by the online exam parameter, which is happening with other vendors, because a lot of cheating is possible in the online exams. So one more important point which is changed in IC Square exam is, initially the CSSP was introduced as a CAT based exam. Based on the adaptive, they will send you the next question. And based on that same practice, but it's not a CAT, but CSSLP and CCSP also introduce the option of not going back. It means if you are in a question number 1 and moving to the question number 2, you can't come back to question number 1, which was there till last year on CSSLP and CCSP. So even when I attempted last year ISSAP exam also, so in that also there was an option for review back. But now this year what we have noticed that okay, there is no option for review back. Once you selected, we have to move to the next window. So my important suggestion is, whenever you find any exam question difficult and all that, bring positive emotions in your brain, bring positive emotions among you. Because example, like when you know the answer, when you know the topic, it is easy for you to answer the option. But you never heard that, or the exam question was lengthy and all that, it creates some kind of a distress. So my suggestion is that whenever you practice questions, no matter it is how hard it is, how easy it is, bring positive emotions. Okay, when you're reading the question, wow, we're going to solve this. So this is some kind of a positive emotions you need to bring, and that is how you can able to tackle the stress. So when I say 180 minutes you have in which you need to answer 125 questions, so my suggestion is that first 50 questions, 50 minutes you can take. Then my suggestion is take a 10 minutes break. Then next 50 questions and 60 minutes. My suggestion. Okay, so it means 60 minutes this and 60. So in 120 minutes, you're able to cover the 100 questions. So you're left with another 80 minutes in which you need to attempt the 25 question, which is a cakewalk. So frequent breaks are important. You must take. It is an unscheduled break. It means there's no timer will be stopped from IC Square, but it is highly recommended to take a breaks. So your mind should be sharp. Your mind should be calm. When you start your exam, just wrote down, this will be my certification. And second is be calm and think like a manager, because your role in entire CSSLP is not to implement anything. You are not going to develop anything. You are not going to do coding anything. You're just going to suggest during a coding what need to be done from a security point of view, during a design phase what need to be considered from a security point of view. That is the only thing you need to consider. Okay, so think like a manager, be calm. This is your certification. This will be your certification. Just note down these positive affirmations that bring the positive emotions among you when you're practicing the questions and in the real exam. My one more important suggestion is that as we are not used to it after the college to sit for 1 or 2 hours, okay, so my suggestion is that 2 days before the exam or 3 days before the exam, make a practice of sitting 3 hours with the same psychology of exam, so that in the real exam you will not face any kind of a distress about sitting for 3 hours and all that, because that concentration practice you need to build. Okay, so this is just a small important thing which I would like to suggest. The next important thing we have called understand an overview. See, before going to understand the CSSLP, I thought I will give you a very high level overview about here. If we talk about SDLC, in SDLC we have a phases. Requirement is a phase, design is a phase, development is a phase, testing is a phase, and deployment is a phase. These are the phases we have in the SDLC. What is the role of a CSSLP? The role of a CSSLP is to introduce a security parameter in the SDLC, like risk assessment during a requirement. So here when you do CSSLP, you bring this concern, okay, we must do risk assessment on the requirement that we receive from a customer, and then we'll take a call that, okay, can we procure this application from outside, or we can develop in-house? What is the governance issue? What is the regulatory issue? What is the compliance issue? We can't expect this from the application programmer, developer and all that. But who going to guide them? CSSLP professionals, and that we're going to learn here. Now, or you are a developer, you never heard about the GRC and all that. So you went for the CSSLP certification where you try to understand, okay, from a security point of view, these are the activity we need to consider. So in CSSLP, we talk about the security activity which is happening in every phase of the SDLC. Okay, so here you can see risk assessment, how to conduct the threat modeling, when to do the static analysis, when to do the test, or what is a security assessment, what is a secure configuration, bug tracking, placement of bug tracking. So all those things are basically covered in the CSSLP. So we know that, okay, we know this, but in CSSLP we're going to learn this. When to introduce what, why we are introducing, what is the reason for that is covered in the CSSLP. Okay, so developer will get a new perspective, IT security professional, risk assessment, the risk assessor will get a new perspective about what need to be considered in every phase of the application development, security operations, security governance in application development, building a strategy to develop the secure application, integrate the security matrix in the SDLC. All those things are covered in the CSSLP. Now, one more important thing we have here is example requirement phase here. Okay, now if you are CSSLP here, after doing a risk assessment, you will going to establish the security requirement. Okay, we need a chat-based authentication, or we need an authorization. Here we basically build a bug bar. Okay, we're going to do the security privacy assessment, okay, on the requirement that we receive from a customer. Now one customer said that we want to build an application like a Uber, and Uber collecting the location information. So consider the parameter of PIA here. Okay, if I collect the location information, what is the impact on the privacy? Now we can't expect this from a developer. Okay, we need to conduct PI in which phase that cover in the CSSLP. Now during a design, we have a threat modeling and design. Okay, so we understood, okay, we need functional design to be defined. We're going to design the entire application on a paper and understand the entire thought process, but considering the security parameter, considering the attack surface analysis, which is called as a AAA, threat modeling, that is defined in the design stage. When we're doing a testing, which is called as implementation, we have to use the approve tool. Okay, we need to avoid the unsafe function. So we can't expect this from a developer. These inputs are given by the CSSLP guy. Once the applications develop, we go for a testing. What kind of a testing we can perform? First testing, in which condition we can go for first testing? What is the positive and negative impact of the first testing? Because if you simply tell the developer we need to conduct a first testing, he will just drive the first testing. But what is the security impact of the first testing? Does it compromise the integrity? Does it compromise the confidentiality? Does it compromise the availability? So that need to be considered. In which condition we need to perform the first testing? That is the role of a CSSLP. Then during a deployment, the first thing we need to understand the certification accreditation. We need to send the product for a common criteria. You can't expect from a developer to have a visibility about the common criteria standard. Okay, so we need to send for a common criteria. We need to prepare the protection profile. We need to prepare the security target. We need to prepare the documentation for a protection profile. We need to obtain the accreditation, certification accreditation. All those things is a role of a CSSLP. And when we deploy the application in a production, we need to create a secure environment. That is the role of a CSSLP. So all these activities or security governance, we going to learn in the CSSLP. So now we need to understand who should obtain this CSSLP certification. It can be it can be obtained by the architect, engineer, developer, specialist, tester, manager, penetration tester, procurement analyst, project manager, security manager, IT director. So this is a certification for all these professionals. Is it clear? So do I need to know development? No. Do I need to know coding? No. Do I need to know how the testing works? No. You need to have a high level visibility because the certification is a managerial certification. Okay, so I was heading information security. Now I am taking an application team under me. Okay, application development team is going to ask me about the application security requirement. So with that state of mind, we am going with the CSSLP certification. Okay, so when we're preparing for CISSP, CCSP, we say, think like a manager, think like an advisor. Security is the most important thing. So there are some important points in CSSLP you need to focus on. Okay, these are the key points in CSSLP, which is also called as an intention point when you're preparing for this certification. So the first part is called as a quality assurance check. What is the goal of a quality assurance check? So quality assurance quality assurance basically check whether software is reliable. So this can be the exam question. What is the ultimate goal of a quality assurance? Is to check whether software is reliable. Okay, then security concepts are essential building block for the secure software development. Definitely, security is something we need to start from a day first. Security must start from an initial phase where you're having a meeting with the stakeholder. Okay, and software security must balance the usability and performance. What is the meaning of that? Suppose I am coming with one application which has a 3 dimensions. One is called as a usability, functionality, and security. This is basically called as a security cursor. If I move this ball toward the usability, I give too much usable functions in the application. In that case, too much user friendly will compromise my security and my functionality. Okay, and if I move this ball towards security, it was so many security parameter in that particular application. Example, I log in first, it asked me to enter the complex password, then it asked me to enter the OTP, then it asked me to enter the security question. The person can be pissed off, kind of frustrated, right? So too much security there. In that case, there is no usability, there is no functionality. So as a CSSLP, whenever you suggest any important solutions and all that, prepare the security parameter in such a manner by which we need to balance between the usability and performance, because too much security impact the performance. Okay, design is a concept with reference with the flaw we use, and in a code we identify the bug. Okay, when we design any application, we based on the data thought process, we try to understand the flaw in that thought process. So according to that, we can rectify during a development. And during a development, when we're doing coding, we review the code to identify the bug. So code equal to bug and design equal to flaw. There's another important thing is if the design is a software assurance. So primary concern with design issue is related to the software assurance. So they have to rectify that. IV and V is very important. It means verification. You need to have a very good understanding of the difference between the verification and validation. What is the difference? Verification means you read the CSSLP as per the course outline, and validation means whether you clear the exam. One more example I can give you. This is the software which is developed as per what we have documented the requirement. That is a verification. This software is basically developed as per the user objective, which is called intent. That is called as a validation. Okay, so verification against the documented procedure and validation as per the user objective. Like, application was developed as per what we have agreed in the design functional requirement. That is a verification. but this application actually address the intent of the user, actually address the intent of the problem that is faced by user. That is a validation. So validation is the most important thing, and based on that only the stakeholder accept the application. Another important thing is called as a fundamental consideration. So fundamental consideration for a software acceptance is, if I am a stakeholder, I'm going to accept the application because of the existence and completeness of the documentation. Because when we deploy the application in a production and all that, we are expecting to have a full KT, full documentations and all that, so the user can able to use a document effectively. And quality assurance team will ensure that we have a complete documentation associated with the applications. Another important thing, the primary objective of documentation are to make the software deployment process easy and repeatable. When we have a template in place, we can able to reuse the document for other purpose. That's why we expecting a standard template to be used in the development environment. Another important element we have called documentation. So documentation is a key deliverables in the end of the SDLC. And it is very important whenever you onboard any vendor and all that, and you go with the contract, law of the land is very important. Senior management is accountable for security, and CSSLP is accountable for implementing a security in the application development. You also need to have a good understanding of the cryptography type, symmetric, asymmetric. In symmetric, we have a block, stream. So highly recommend you to review the CISSP cryptography area. It's very, very important. You need to have a very good understanding for BCP-DR. You need to have a very good understanding of MTD-RTO, because when we develop any application, we also need to consider the availability aspect of an application. We need to prepare the contingency strategy for the application that you're going to deploy in the production environment. And in that case, MTD, RTO and RPO, you need to have a very good understanding. And BIA also. Supply chain risk assessment is another important point that you have to review. And as I said, security must be the first and foremost view as a non-functional requirement. Security is a non-functional requirement. Good understanding of the architecture risk analysis is also required. We're doing all this security activity. Why? The question is, why we're doing all this security We're doing this all security activity to make sure the software should be developed as a reliable parameter. It should be resilient for all kind of an attack, and it can be recovered easily in the case of any attack. So ultimate goal of introducing the security processes in the SDLC to make sure it should be reliable, it must be resilient, and it must be recovered in the case of any disaster. So you need to have a very good understanding of the difference between the reliability, resiliency, and recoverability. But the question is now, what are the important resources you need to refer? So the primary document which I would recommend you personally is CBK 2nd edition of CSSLP. Their backside of the question is very, very important. That will be your primary book, and the secondary book will be your all-in-one. Those who don't have a security background, for them CSSLP is the primary certification or first certification in IC Square. Highly recommend to review the all-in-one. It is my suggestion, you can skip domain 8 from the 2nd edition. It will definitely create a lot of confusion, but whatever is covered in this particular book, so use this as a primary book. If you have a budget, then you can purchase the IC Square study material. IC Square has already introduced a new version of CSSLP, which is called as a student edition. But I still recommend you, if you don't want to invest much money, you can go with the 2nd edition of CSSLP, which is a 2013 or 2012. I believe 80% of the content it's still that covered. Along with that, you can compensatory use the 2nd book, which is called all-in-one. One more important thing, the back side of every chapter in the all-in-one questions, avoid that because it will create the unnecessary confusion for you. But highly recommend to review the domain question which is happening in CSSLP. If you really want to have a great understanding of domain 1, I told you about security design principles and all that. For that, you can refer the essential CSSLP exam guide. And if you like some videos and you have a budget, then go for the plural site Kevin instructor. So Kevin is an instructor who delivers CSSLP in plural side. And if you're looking for my training, then you can contact InfoSec Train. Okay, so best video resource Kevin plural side, and the next best resource is me, who basically offer the training and my instructors. See, as this video I have created with the complete parameter of free knowledge, so that's why I have added InfoSec Train, because where I worked, and Kevin videos even I referred, and I have seen a lot of feedback about Kevin videos. So I would recommend you to review the Kevin videos once. Okay, I would recommend you to start with the Kevin videos first and then read the CBK. It will give you a good perspective, my suggestion. So this CSSLP CBK with Kevin video is enough, or InfoSec Train with IC Square book is enough. Along with that, there is a one document you have to review, which is highly recommended, called as a 800-161 supply chain risk management process. You need to have a very good understanding of OWASP top 10, especially your injection flow, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and cross-site request forgery, and their associate countermeasures. So when you're preparing for CSSLP, you need to have a very good understanding of this area. Along with that, there is a document called as the architectural risk analysis. Highly recommend to review that, because this content is a part of a new version of CSSLP. Okay, so these are the things we have that you need to consider. Now, next thing is called as a experience requirement. Once you're done with the CSSLP exam, you need to submit your experience. So you need to have a minimum 4 years of experience in SDLC, in which 1 or more of the 8 domains you can show, or the 3 year of the SDLC, and if you have one certification which can be compensate that. So that can be done there. And the third option is, if you don't have a required experience, you can basically apply this called associate. Okay, once you complete your experience, you can just reapply the application and they will reward you CSSLP. Definitely you don't need to write this exam again. So in the exam, the most important thing is they test scenarios. You need to have a very good understanding of a concept. Example like, economy or mechanism with mediation, then symmetric, asymmetric, okay, compiler switch. So instead of going in detail, you need to have a very high level overview about the concept. So the question is all about testing the sense of scenarios with the concept. Then in some questions, you need to use common sense. Okay, security is ultimately responsibility of the everyone, right? It's a common sense. Experience of risk assessor required. As I said, during exam, there will be 2 options. Okay, you are a security consultant and you discover the application has a vulnerability. What is the next best step you will take? Okay, you will confirm the vulnerability, because your role is not an implementer here. So experience of a risk assessor is required here. You need to pick best out of all. That is another important parameter you need to consider. In questions, there are some keywords will be there. Most, best, primary, first, main. These keywords basically change the options. Example, what is the most important book for CSSLP? Definitely official book. Okay, that is the most important book. What is the best book for domain 2? Here, according to condition, scenario change, because the word best is involved there. Okay, Prabh, most is definitely, but best for domain 2 is this, which give you understanding. What is the primary objective of watching this training, watching this video? Clearing the exam, getting knowledge. So ultimate goal is to clear the knowledge, right? Clear the certification. So primary objective was reviewing. This video is clear the exam. What is the first step in CSSLP preparation? So first is a word used for sequence. Okay. And last is basically called as a main, which is used for the overall outcome. So these are the keywords we have that you need to refer. Exam retake policy, everything is there in the IC Square website that you can review from there. Okay, so this is all from my side, team. And if you find this video useful, do share your comments, do share your feedback in the comment section, and whatever the support is required regarding CSSLP, you can drop me an email. Okay, this is all from my side, team. Thank you so much for your time watching this video.